So, hi Ray, welcome to another episode of our Humans in AI series. Today's guest is Dr. Rebecca Marrone, a lecturer and researcher at the University of South Australia. Her work focuses on creativity, well-being, and how technology, especially with AI, shapes education. Rebecca's passionate about helping teachers and students thrive in a digital world. And in today's episode, we're going to look at AI and its role in well-being and creativity in education. So, welcome to the podcast today, Rebecca. How are you? And where do we
Hi,
find you?
Dan. Oh, hi, Dan. Hi, Ray. How's it going? Thank you for having me today.
Where are you today? You in Adelaide?
Yes, I'm almost near the Barossa is where I live, actually. So it's a beautiful day and we've got the spring flowers in bloom. So it's an absolutely stunning day here in sunny Adelaide.
Oh, that's fantastic. I know tomorrow, I think, then this is going to date the podcast, but I think tomorrow you're doing an AI and well-being session for a conference. So
Well,
you're out and about as well.
that will officially be yesterday, Dan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, we're going to release this on Friday. Yay. Happy Friday, everybody.
So
Fantastic.
actually, it's for the Empowering Learners for the Age of AI conference. And if you're listening on Friday in October, then yes, it would have been yesterday, but the conference will be online and recorded. It's free to access. All the videos will be going on YouTube. And I'm going to be hosting a very exciting conversation around AI and wellbeing. We've got some really interesting panelists. So clinical psychologists. We're looking at maybe the connection between sport and well-being. So it's going to be a very fascinating podcast and a really interesting conference. So yeah, please give it a listen.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm going to be really interested in this conversation because I read a lot of headlines about AI and well-being that aren't particularly positive. And so it's going to be great to have that balance. But Dan, the question I've got for you is, why did we line this up? You know about Rebecca and her work. So why did you ask her to come along and talk to us? What was the thing that fired it off for you?
Well, I've been following Rebecca's research for quite some time, and the depth of work and research she's been doing in Australia around even some of the research that we've had on the MIT brain rot paper. I know herself and Vida from UNISA also wrote the response to that. So the work that Rebecca's been doing in creativity and AI, bringing stuff together around well-being, all of those kind of things connect the dots. And I've been on multiple kind of university study panels and things like that, where Rebecca's been a contribution in this area academically is absolutely fantastic. So I'm stoked to have her on the call today. It's brilliant. If we go into the first question, now this is a big one and it's a bit of a loaded one because we hear a lot about teacher burnout. Now, AI companies or AI tools are kind of saying in the press, our tool reduces teacher workload by X amount. And that's quite polarizing wherever we start. And people ask, well, what are we going to fill the work time that we save with? Are we just going to add more work on? But teacher burnout is a real thing, right? Can you explain where you kind of feel teacher burnout and the impact of AI on teacher and student well-being starts to fit together, Rebecca?
Yeah, so I do quite a bit of professional learning with schools around AI, looking at how do we develop artificial intelligence like literacy, or how are we developing teacher skills or leader skills around AI. And what I find is the really important place to start is helping teachers understand their problem. And so I start with the question, what is your biggest problem at work? We don't do anything with technology. We just spend some time thinking. And the same responses come up, whether you're an early year teacher, whether you're a senior leader, whether you're in an early childhood centre through to higher education. We see the same sorts of responses from students. And so what we try to do through the professional learning and ongoing engagement and connection is teach teachers and students how to use the AI tools to support them with their problem. And I think once the teacher sees themselves as a critical user of an AI tool or of any AI tools, and they can see it working for them, they can start to apply it to other areas of their practice or of their personal life. And so they can start to reduce some of those problems that are really personal. And then we can start to see a reduction potentially in some of those negative things that come alongside, like burnout, like fatigue, and so forth. But I feel teachers don't often have a lot of time. That is probably the thing that comes up the most. Teachers don't have a lot of time to sit and explore and play. And so providing them the opportunity to do that means that they can see some buy-in themselves. If we just presented a suite of tools, or if I just said, oh, look, AI is going to help you with your burnout, they're not going to see themselves in these tools. And so it's just going to be another fad, and it's just going to fall away to the side like we've seen with other things. But if the teacher can see themselves using it, or if they can see a benefit for whatever problem it might be on the day and moving forward, then I think we're going to see that buy-in and engagement. And then over time, it becomes embedded in their practice. It becomes a daily part of their lives. And hopefully we can, over time, reduce some of those things like burnout.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I've not thought about it in this way before, but that autonomy piece about you pick how you're going to use it to help you solve your particular issue is something that I think is happening with AI, because in many cases, organizations aren't mandating AI. What's happening is individuals are bringing their AI in to work with them on their phone, and they're using it to do things. And so they've got that autonomy to do things, rather than, if I think about, okay, confession time. I've had 40 years in education technology. I have lost count of the number of products that I must have been responsible for marketing, saying, this is going to save teachers time. And what it actually is if you do the things the way we define you should do them, then we're going to be able to claim it saves you time, as opposed to what I guess I get from that, your description there is, here's a thing that you can choose to help you, and you can choose the way in which you help it. And that's quite different, because it's individually led rather than top down. Is that what have I interpreted that correctly?
Absolutely. I think part of our job as ed tech providers or researchers or users of the tools ourselves is to make them accessible to others so that they can use it in a meaningful way. And a lot of the time it's just breaking down the barrier, addressing things like stereotypes. But then once you provide that equal foundation on that platform, then the user has the autonomy to engage in it however they see fit. And so if that's, helping them with an administrative task through to, I used AI to help me create my wedding invitations. So, where we see ourselves in the tool is the key part. And we have to make that accessible for others if we're going to see any benefit at all.
And I suppose the part we're at the minute, and this has come up a couple of times in our podcast, and it's becoming part of society. And I've picked up two things in the last 2 weeks where students have unfortunately committed suicide utilizing AI tools. And I don't want to go down a dark path here, but we have to address it at some point. Probably we'll do an episode on it. But when you're an adult in this area and you're using AI tools to support your well-being and your burnout and your elements there, is great. But then now our AI tools are being released in applications on mobile phones, on their iPads, where students are using it. So there's, again, I suppose, even more of a important area to start to explore in terms of whether students are getting access to it, and then when they're using it to support them as something in an academic study or in a personal situation. And we have to be very careful around well-being there, because we do know as well at the same time that there's a big issue with students, especially boys, in society at the minute, with their kind of all the masculinity stuff that's going on with Andrew Tate and all the social media things. There's a balance here. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that. I know it's a kind of big sort of area, and I've been quite a generic about what I mentioned there.
So I'm going to focus it into a specific question then, because there's a really good set of points. But the question I've got then is, I think of AI as a dual-use technology. It can be used for good and it can be used for evil.
That's a good analogy.
In the context of well-being, are there scenarios where it can be helpful, and are there scenarios where in your head you would kind of not sure that's a good idea?
Absolutely. So can AI be used to support well-being? Yes. Should it? That's another question. I think as we develop, literacy with students and with babies, we start with basic sounds, and then we gradually move into maybe phonics, and then into reading and spelling and so forth. We need to be doing that and treat ourselves like we're babies learning a language. The misuse of these tools can be so devastating that if we're not trained on how to adequately use it, then it's not really working for us, but it's happening to us. And I feel there is a really important shift that we're seeing when social media happened and it felt like it happened to us. We didn't really have a say in any of those tools. And we're now dealing with the ramifications years later of online bullying and the comparisons and poor mental health and low well-being of lots of people, not just our young people. What feels different with AI is there are so many conversations happening. There are so many voices in the room. And I'm hopeful that over time, we can have enough of a voice and we can use the platforms we have through podcasts, through research, through whatever it may be, to ensure that we're seeing accurate representations of ourselves in these algorithms or in these tools, but that these tools are being made to support us so that we can minimize some of the impacts that we're seeing. The first chatbot ever was a mental health chatbot. So it's Eliza, I think it was 60s or 70s, I can't remember, but it was based on Rogerian psychotherapy. So it basically just parroted back to you what you had said previously. So this concept is not new, and poor mental health and is not new, but we do have some amazing strategies and lots of fantastic techniques, cognitive behavioral therapy and so forth, that AI facilitate on a larger and more personalized scale. So the benefits could potentially be there, but we need to do good, thorough research. We need to be developing the soft skills alongside it. We need to be using them in safe and inclusive manners so these tools have less of that kind of devastating impact.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it's such a big area in terms of well-being, and Ray's analogy there of having those two sides of the debate and the story, I think it's really important the schools are clear about where they're going to be implementing this technology when they talk about, and parents as well, because ultimately, I think just reflecting back on what you said there, when I was in the school myself, in a leadership position, when social media came out, we had that call to make on Facebook, which is the first one that everybody's worried about. And I still kick myself to this day because, like, I sort of got pressured into banning it, like most schools did. We had to ban it. We banned Facebook, and then I just got instinct that if we were going to ban it, who was going to teach the kids about it? Because the parents at that point weren't on those social media applications, and kids are getting on these things, and we didn't have an opportunity to have a debate and a discussion. And you see a similar thing happening now with the social media ban in Australia, where teachers been involved in that process. But that's really interesting. So when we then move from well-being and then think about creativity, because you've done a lot of research in that area, tell us what your thoughts are and what the research is saying about AI and creativity and where we are currently.
The research is quite mixed on, does AI help creativity? Does it hinder creativity? I think a lot in the media, we see shock, misrepresentation and misinformation. So that MIT brain rot study is a great example. It's a study that went viral that's not amazing research at all, not at all peer reviewed. As you said earlier, Dan, my colleague Vidomir Kavanovic and I did a review on that paper for the conversation. That went viral. So that was translated into multiple languages and so forth. The research is mixed. I think we see a mix because research is typically done in labs. It's very rarely done with students in classrooms, with teachers over long periods of time. When we have done that, and we have done that, so a couple of my colleagues from UniSA and I a few years ago, so Professor Martin Delat and Dr. Andrew Zemechnik and a couple of others as well, so some PhD students who have just graduated, so Dr. Arsalan Azad and then Mrs. Megan Taylor, who should be finishing soon, which Excellent. Is very exciting. We worked with students for 8 weeks in a grade 9 classroom. And we gave them exposure to artificial intelligence. So they worked with the AI as a teammate. It helped them through a problem-solving process. They engaged overall for about 8 to 10 hours with this AI tool. We looked at things like their creativity, their perceptions of the tool, and so forth. And students had quite narrow views of the tool and didn't really like it at the end of the 8 weeks. We thought it was going to be something interesting. They used it for a little bit and then it fell aside. So we didn't really see any impact on their creativity either. What we are seeing, some of the benefits of AI is in the ability to assess some of these competencies like creativity, which are traditionally fuzzy and hard to measure in real classrooms. AI can help speed up this assessment process. So An example I have is a very common creativity assessment that we typically do with students. Takes about an hour for the student to do. It costs $200 per student. It probably then takes an academic at least 1 to 2 hours to score. So the costs of time and energy and resources start adding up really quickly. What Professor David Cropley and I did is we automated this assessment. The ability to create like a natural language processing algorithm to score this assessment of creativity can now happen in a matter of seconds, which means we can make it more affordable to the school, but it's more accurate than the human as well. And instead of it taking 6 months, you could do it in your classroom, you could have it instantly scored and so forth. So we're trying to minimize some of the fuzziness in these competencies, and creativity is a good example, and make it meaningful to a teacher and to a student. So not just a score, but then pedagogically, what can you do with this? So can the AI also support the development of student creativity? So what does it mean to be low in creativity?
That's really fascinating. I know you're talking about this in the context of schools, but I'm thinking about the work that I do. So I do a lot of things with the Future Skills Organisation. They're one of the jobs and skills councils in Australia, and their task is to define the skills that are needed by employees in the finance, business and technology sector, and to make sure that the education system is able to deliver those skills. And what is really interesting there is when we're thinking about the skills that future employees are going to need, having an encyclopedia knowledge of a particular topic is not going to be as important as creativity, the ability to ask the right questions, the things that we've traditionally called soft skills. Those are the skills that are going to be AI resistant for people as they go into careers in the future. So if you've done some work that's cracked that problem around starting to assess creativity and other skills in that area, it'll be really interesting for employers and later on in education, because that's a problem we always have as an employer. I always know that a student has been through years of education, lots of high stakes testing, but ultimately when they walk into an interview, they have got a piece of paper that proves something, and I have 20 to 40 minutes to be able to assess their skills. And so having work in that area is going to be fascinating, I think, for future workforce.
I completely agree. I think historically what we've seen when we're assessing skills like creativity, so actually if we use creativity as an example, so we see this in education, so K to 12, in higher education, and then also in some creativity assessments for job performance. They're very typically open-ended, divergent thinking tasks. So can you tell me how many different ways that we could use a brick in this house? Now tell me as a boss, as a teacher, as a lecturer, how that information is useful. I struggle to see how it has any use at all. If you're an employer that is specific to you need creativity in mathematics, well, historically, we know that the student has taken mathematics for all throughout their schooling. They've gone on to university if they're applying for your engineering company or whatever it may be. We have so much data that would give insight into how their creativity has developed over their entire schooling process. That's just sitting there that we can assess in different ways. So it's not just alternate uses for a brick, but it's can they choose the right problem at the right time, the right solution to the problem at the right time, which we know is really key for creativity, but also really key for business success. So I think the ability to do this and assess these skills is where the power of AI truly lies, because it means we can do something about it as well. And so if your dream is to be an engineer and you know that you need to be a creative engineer in 15 years' time, you can start working on that right now. So it's an interesting space, and we've done it with creativity. We're looking at it with complex problem solving, metacognition, and so forth. So some of these really key, important workforce skills, if you like.
I love that, because there's a lot of people on speaking circuits and things like that at the minute that say, what skills do my kids need? And they say soft skills and problem solving and things. And I get that, but I'm trying to push back on it a little bit because I don't think that's fair to kids. Just as a parent, I'm like, I know that's all we need, but kids also need to know, well, where do they stand with that? I'm thinking if my son leaving school now in year 12, if he could have an assessment that says, hey, you've got, I don't know, 80%, or these are the examples that we've used in the past for problem solving or whatever it might be, that's so much more tangible than you a good problem solver and all this kind of stuff. Because I think they struggle, and we all struggle, I suppose. Where do we give examples of that? Where do we have evidence for that? You've got to kind of keep putting impact statements in your resumes and things. That's great. That's really, really good. We never talked about the way we can assess these soft skills before in the podcast. This is really interesting.
Well, and we're too busy worrying about the fact that AI is driving their coach and horses through our current assessment system to think about what might be possible in the future.
A coach and horses, right? That's dated you transportation around Sydney there, isn't it? That's really, really good. So when we bring these two topics to a conclusion, I suppose, when we're thinking about how do staff and students then start to develop healthy boundaries using AI, what kind of strategy should they be thinking about? Have you got any research about that?
Can I just add onto that? Because my alarm bells have been ringing around the ethical dimensions of what we've been talking about as well. So I'd love to get your perspective on that too.
Okay, so I think to handle the ethics question first is a little bit more specific to wellbeing, and then also to creativity or the assessment of these skills. And there's two things there. So the assessment of these skills, the ethics around it is data privacy, data security. How are we managing those things? Am I consenting for an employer to look at my historical creativity assessments? Like, where is my role and my autonomy in that? So that's one thing. The second thing around mental health or well-being and the ethics around those topics, we are in a loneliness epidemic. We know that mental health is at an all-time low for a lot of people for a lot of reasons. People feel more isolated than ever. But I think that AI is not a magic bullet or anything like that, a magic pill that's going to fix all of our problems. It really is about developing adequate training and adequate AI literacy so we can be safe users of these tools. So we know when, where, and how to use it, but also when, where, and how to seek support from humans or from our friends. I think that's just as important.
Yeah, I suppose that brings that fully together there and closes that loop on that one, because I don't think anybody's got any answers for these, but I think at least having an idea of where we go with boundaries of technology generally. And are you finding from a research point of view that and the students or PhD candidates that are coming into you in university and the people you're seeing in other universities, is there a kind of trend that's starting to appear around this? Is this something that needs more research? Are people really looking at the ethical areas and the health benefits of AI or not?
There's some really interesting emerging research around like fairness and bias in algorithms. And so how you can create a fairness algorithm that is overlaid over the top of another algorithm to assess the bias in the original algorithm, because that could come from the data set, it could come from how the algorithm is created and so forth. So it's an interesting and extremely important aspect of research that must be done. Interestingly, a few colleagues and I are getting ready to run an experiment soon, actually, around student perceptions of gender and AI. I just think before we put AI in a human form, before we embody AI and we end up with some of the problems that we've seen historically with girls don't necessarily see mathematics as something that's for them, or that they're less inclined to go into STEM careers. I think before we embody AI, we need to be asking, how are our young students experiencing these AI technologies? Are there differences? And are they gendered? These questions will raise important points about how we move forward with these tools and what boundaries we're setting with students and with teachers. But just to come back to your earlier question, Dan, around barriers, I think we need to go back to like good old-fashioned educational theories. We need to think about how are we modeling safe use of these tools for our students? And then how are we scaffolding our students as well? And we say students, but this could be teachers and peers and so forth. So I think we shouldn't forget what has worked historically and just apply that in new context for engaging students and teachers and building some of these barriers.
That's a really good point, because I was speaking to a teacher from Aspect, the Autism Spectrum Australia, the other day, and we had a good conversation about the tools that their students were utilising, and obviously they've got their own specific needs. And it was interesting because they were trying to meet the students halfway with the tools they already had, like things like ChatGPT and some of the tools there, but you then got the danger of not being able to manage those as a parent. So you're right, it's coming back to basics really, and making sure the teachers are aware of some of the tools and technologies and the pros and cons of these along the way as well.
I've got a very direct question to ask then. So it's all fascinating of the things that we've talked about, and it's led my mind off in lots of different directions. The question I've got is two questions. It's, what is the most interesting research that you've read that you would recommend? If I'm a teacher in a classroom and I'm starting to think about these issues, what is the most interesting piece of research that you've read that I should go and read, or get AI to read for me and help me to understand? And then the second piece is, what is the most interesting bit of research you've done that we should all go and read?
Oh, tough questions. I actually think, so I don't necessarily have a favorite piece of research. I have favorite researchers. And so even just through Google Scholar, you can subscribe to academics when they publish papers. You can subscribe to, if you have access to journals, like the table of contents, and see what's published in certain journals. So I have favorite researchers. I really like reading the research from George Siemens. He's he pushes the boundary on absolutely everything. And so some of his interesting blogs, fascinating. It's a lot more practical. I think we have fantastic research and researchers in Australia that maybe don't get the credit that they deserve internationally. And what I find with the local researchers here is they love it when you send them an email, or if you have a question, or if you want to reach out. And so I think if you do come across somebody that you really like, send them an email, ask them for the research. A lot of it does sit behind paywalls, but if you're interested in a topic, then do a Google search, see what local academics are around, and then I'm sure they would be more than happy to speak with you. So I don't necessarily have a favorite piece of research. And then for my own research, that's a tough question as well. I do really like the work that we've done around creativity and AI, and how students perceive AI, and how students are perceiving the role of AI as a teammate in particular. So I can give a link for that paper.
Right, we'll stick that in the show notes. That'll be fantastic.
More interestingly, and I'm hopeful this research will be published soon, it's a new model on how we can be conceptualizing well-being in the age of AI. So there was about 15 of us academics on that, and it's a collection of different experts from around the world, and looking at their opinions and their thoughts on how we can be using well-being, how we can be using AI to support well-being from a variety of different perspectives. So I'm hopeful that will be out soon too.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate the insights into the kind of research field, as well as the kind of latest developments on AI, well-being, and your angle on creativity. It's been fascinating. I've learned a heap today. We need to go back and rethink our next episodes as well, right?
And I want to thank you for speaking so plainly about your work, because we've talked about a couple of hundred research papers over the time that we've been doing this podcast, and one of my biggest challenges is always turning it from academic speak into plain language. And so it's always great to talk to somebody who can understand the depth and the complexity of what they're dealing with at an academic level, but then turn it into something that just makes sense to a classroom teacher. And I think what I've just heard over the last half an hour are things that will make sense to a teacher sitting in a classroom trying to struggle with how do I help my students get the most out of AI. It's been brilliant for that.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Ray.
Thanks,
It's been
Rebecca.
great. And I look forward to hearing your exciting guests and future podcasts. Yeah, really looking forward to it.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.